everybody, Marcus here, and as a huge fan of Two Steps from Hell and Thomas Bergeson's music, I'm really excited to show you this track breakdown. So we will be taking a look at one of my recently composed music tracks called Eternal Horizons, which is really inspired by Two Steps from Hell's music. So let's just get into, and I will break it down into sections and mixing, mastering and all plugins and effects used on this track to inspire you for your own compositions. I basically started with the piano first. I added the bass chord progression and added a main melody on top, which is sounding like this. Just this kind of like pretty memorable melody with also this kind of epic touch to it. And like the main featured instrument in this track is the solo cello, so I basically made sure that this melody works pretty well with then played by a solo cello. So if I put in the solo cello as well. As a piano, I use the, I think I use the Grandeur from Native Instruments. Yeah, and on the cello, I basically use the Stradivari cello, also from Native Instruments. Just has this really slow, accentuated legato, which I really liked in this piece because it gives this kind of lyrical, expressive feel to it. On the piano, I basically then added some, you also have some reverb, Seventh Heaven reverb additional on the piano, and on the cello, I basically just applied some compression, kind of arpeggiated synthesizer, which is basically just playing a sequenced section of the notes. Just giving this kind of rhythmic feel, but also then just playing the melody and just giving this kind of rhythmic texture to the melody. So if we then solo it or hear it together with the cello and the piano, it sounds like that. Just gives this kind of nice additional texture to the melody. And also later on, like, synthesizers can greatly help make melodies pop out a little bit more and just accentuate your strings or basically other orchestral elements. So I can really recommend playing with synthesizers and just exploring what synthesizers can do for your cinematic music, because there's so much potential in bass lines, but also on melodies and just augmenting what's already there in the orchestra. I have a bass sequence also from a synthesizer. It's basically, on this I used from Mosaic Bass, basically a sequenced bass pattern. In solo it sounds like that. It's just basically playing the root notes of the chord progression and then together with the other synth. And then you have the piano and then also the cello. And then from the main harmonic content of my chords, I then split them up into different voices for the basses, for the cellos, and then for the violas, and they are basically just supporting the main melody and basically having different. Basically, these are the supporting elements from the orchestra, like basses, cello, violas. And then you have the solo cello on top of that. Just giving this emotional background support of the main melody. For the strings, beside the solo cello, I use the Benjamin Wellfish strings, which I find have a really expressive tone character to them, which just fit the mood quite well. And then when we get closer to the main chorus section, we also add violins on top of it. Just adding like an additional counter melody on top of it. Then we also have horns, which are then starting when we get to the transition to the main chorus section. As horns, I'm using the Tom Holkenborg brass, which I find have a really nice deep sampled expression range, like from totally silent to like uber epic, which is like really like awesome to get this kind of low expression and then like go really big in the main chorus. So let's just solo the horns. Then we have trumpets coming in as well. Just doubling the horns. Then we have trombones. And then just a run leading into the main chorus section. And then on the main chorus section, oh yeah, I forgot the choir. We also have a choir from Chorus from Audio Imperia, a really awesome epic choir, which is then also playing like the bass harmony, and then also this kind of run, which then leads into the main chorus section. In the middle of the intro, we also have drums coming in, and we have some basic percussion. So let's cover the basic percussions first. Those are from Damage 2. They are just some basic, deep, epic trailer hits with some accentuation on the end of the bars, just giving this kind of drive leading to the next rotation of the melody. I'm using from Rise and Hit, I'm using transitional elements. Then we have the drums kicking in. I'm using Superior Drummer 3. Basically some modified preset, low ceiling preset, which has this like really big, roomy, punchy sound, but I tweaked some of the mixing settings. I will not go into too much details on the drum mixing right here. When we get to the main chorus section, things get switched up quite a lot. So we will have some, basically here I have the same supporting elements of the orchestra of basses, cello and violas, but we then add like ostinatos on the woodwinds, and then also like the supporting ostinatos on the violins and also on the violas, just to give this more kind of driving character of the chorus section. And then also some bass strings, which basically accentuate the main elements of the chord progression, like the root notes. Just a really subtle accentuation, basically. We as well also have the sequenced synthesizer supporting the melody. We also have the cello, and we also have the choir setting in. But on the first playthrough of the chorus, we just have the supporting harmonies sung by the choir. The main melody is also played by the brass section. We have the horns, which also play the main melody. Some counter melody on the... Oh, it's a doubled melody on the trumpets. The trombones, yeah, they basically play the root chords of the progression as a secondary melody. And on top of that, I added those big brams to the main chorus section, just with the root notes from Symphonic Destruction. Just blowing up the brass section even more. Yeah, and altogether, it basically sounds like this. So then after the main chorus, the first chorus section, we go into a breakdown section where we then have a quieter secondary melody played by the cello and then basically leading into the second climactic chorus section. So it's a lot quieter. We basically have the cello, the piano playing, no drums. Then percussion is setting in now. Also like the ostinatos from the strings and the woodwinds. The drums are basically coming back in. Then we have a run and a rise. Choir is setting in. On the second part, the choir is also like singing the main melody, which just gives this overly blown, epic character of the choir just coming out even more and basically supporting the main melody even more. And on the last part of the climactic chorus section, I also added like a big run on the strings at the end of the melody, just to get to the climax. And then we just build down again. A little bit reverse what we did on the intro section. Now let's get to a point that I cannot emphasize enough. When working on those huge orchestral arrangements with additional drums, percussions, choirs, synthesizers all stacked on top of each other and thrown together is really to get mixing right. I cannot emphasize enough work on your mixing skills. They are so handy tools to have in your portfolio. Imagine like you're working on a painting and only having like one brush or one pencil. Like it's such a big advantage of having like an eraser, a ruler, some kind of, I don't know, different things you can use to improve your painting and just use the different positive effects of those tools, or have those tools at all. Otherwise you are just stuck with, oh, I will add this element, I will add the next element, and you just have to deal with how it sounds. And like working on your mixing skills is crucial to get rid of frequencies you don't really want, applying compression where you have too much dynamic range, like enhancing the frequencies you really want to shine through your mix. It's like you basically are working on this kind of masterpiece painting, and you're using all those different kind of colors. And if you just mix them all together without care, you just end up with brown. And you do not want to have a brown painting. You want to have all those colors shine through. And it's really important to use all those tools which are available to you to make your picture shine in all those colors which you want to shine through and present the listener. So let's go over the mixing I did for this track. Beside the basic volume leveling, I did a lot of volume optimization. This is really important. Do not stick with one basic volume for the whole track. A real orchestra does not play with the same volume for the whole score. There is dynamic, and use those volume automations to give those dynamic to your track. The next point is basically using equalizers to enhance the frequencies you want on certain instruments and strip down or away the frequencies you do not need or want in those instruments. Usually when you use orchestral sample libraries, like the instruments are recorded with a full spectrum, there might be already some EQing going on, depends on the library you're using. Basically, the sample library is designed to sound good on its own when using all of the sections from the one sample library. So if you stack on synthesizers, which for example will add on more low frequencies, you maybe do not need so much low frequencies from your double basses or your cellos. It just depends. You have to check. And you might also do not want the low frequencies from the violas at all. So if you are using additional synthesizers and percussion elements, you might not want to have those low frequencies in the mix of violas, violins, maybe also cellos. It depends on how your setup looks like. And then for instruments which have a really wide frequency range, also do not be afraid to just reduce some frequency ranges just by a few dB, so that other instruments have some space to breathe and to be heard in this kind of frequency range. Then when it comes down to reverbs and for orchestral arrangements, I can also emphasize like using creative reverb effects as like insert effects is totally fine. But then if you want to have it sound as a coherent piece, then use a send reverb on a send bus just to like have all instruments go through the same hall or the same reverb to sound like they're in the same space. Only if you do not want that to be as a stylistic choice, but otherwise it's a good approach to just have a reverb bus and send the instruments to this bus. Another really good tool is using compressors on instruments which have a huge dynamic range. I, for example, use it on the solo cello a lot for just reducing the dynamic range a lot and basically giving the instrument a more coherent presence and volume level throughout the whole piece. And then you can also automate the compression settings for breakdown section, stuff like this. So for the drums, I basically used a transient designer shaper plugin for adjusting the transients and the sustain part of the drums. And then I also used a parallel compression, the own Steinberg's Black Valve. It's like a coloring compressor plugin with a dry wet setting of 60%. So this parallel compression can be a really great trick of giving more presence and more punch to drums without like squashing the transients a lot. And when we come to the deep cinematic hits, I use pretty much the same setup with a transient shaper plugin where I adjusted the transients, did some basic compression, and then I used a multiband compressor. And on the basic EQ, I used some sort of low, like high-pass filter on like 30 Hz to get rid of a little bit of the sub-bass. And then something that's really like a good trick I can show is, for example, we have elements where the percussion is playing on its own, and we have the chorus section where we have the drums kicking in. And then the sub-bass frequency would be doubled by the kick drum and the percussive cinematic deep hits. So basically what I did is sidechaining the kick drum signal of the drums to the percussive cinematic deep hits. Each time the kick hits in, the bass frequency band will be compressed by the sidechain. So you basically do not get a stacking up of the sub-bass frequencies. A really good trick you can utilize for your compositions to not make drum and percussive elements stack up and just create this kind of sub-bass muddy sound. When it comes to mastering, there's like so much to consider, but I will just simply make a really short rundown of what effects I used on my master chain to give you an impression on what you can use and how you can use it. I basically started with side and mid-band separation for the bass frequencies just to get my mix mono-compatible. You're working with a orchestra, and orchestra has a lot of instruments which have a big amount of bass frequencies, and they are separated in the stereo field quite a lot and off axis, so you will basically have a big stereo width in the bass frequencies. So to fix this, you can just use a EQ, separate the sides from the monobands, and basically just make a roll off in the sideband. And then because you are using an EQ which will boost the frequency on the point where you are basically applying the filter, you can on the mid-band apply like a small dip to just compensate for the increase of bass frequencies that will be added by applying this kind of filter. Next up, I'm enhancing the stereo field by using an equalizer on the sideband. And on the sidebands, I'm using a dynamic equalizer curve, which will just boost the frequencies once they reach a certain threshold. I'm applying some subtle saturation. Next up, I'm using a multiband compressor to differently compress frequency ranges. You want different compression on your sub-bass, bass, mids, highs, and like the airy top highs. Last but not least, I'm applying a limiter, and then I'm also having a metering plugin to just check if my frequency response curve of my composition, mixing and mastering matches industry standards or expected frequency response curves. I also am having modo checks to just check if the Modo compatibility is guaranteed. And this is basically the final steps I always have on the mastering side of things. So this wraps up this breakdown of Eternal Horizons. We really hope that this breakdown was helpful for you. Let us know in the comments which parts were the most helpful for you and where would you wish to get more information, more insights and deeper into details. So if you enjoyed this breakdown, leave us a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel for more breakdown videos. And see you on the next one. Happy composing, and now go out and create some awesome music. See you on the next one.